Yeah, thank you, Tony, and thank you to AK Press. Um, I hope everybody's giving them a lot of love. I want to apologize in advance for my semi-profound ignorance of the cultural and political history of Ireland. It extends slightly beyond James Joyce and Sinead O'Connor, but not very far. So if I'm botching things terribly, please let me know. Okay, you can hear me okay? Okay. So, if you hang around anarchist bookstores long enough, and you just might find a copy of the 1992 printing of The Free, signed by one M. Gilliland, with its striking cover image, a black and white photo apparently actually snapped during the Hungarian uprising of 1956, of a young woman, one of the resistance fighters, in a black jacket with a machine gun slung over her shoulder, eyes defiantly gazing out at us. The original 1986 Hooligan Press edition of the book, with its lurid cover more explicitly advertising a scenario of urban combat, is much harder to find, at least on this side of the Atlantic. But the story between those two covers is the same. In a derelict state vaguely resembling Ireland, it's not clear whether north or south, a working-class teenager named Linda breaks away from her abusive parents, her church, and her authoritarian school, falling in with a rapidly growing counter-community simply called The Free. It's part of a dense network of anti-authoritarian co-ops, free schools, syndicalist free unions. Having been introduced to the scene by Linda, who shucks off her old name and adopts the nom de guerre Maxi, we meet a series of protagonists of what shapes up to be a massed contestation of power and ultimately a revolution. Barney the play worker, the lesbian feminist Maggie, Macker the traveler kid, old guard union rep Christo O'Reilly, posh turncoat and movement spy James Smith, and others. All of this ends poignantly. The successful revolution is brutally crushed by an external invasion. The old order is restored with a vengeance, and we see one after another of our protagonists jailed, tortured, and killed. Our only consolation is to see Maxie the runaway still at large, living in hiding under a new name, Trisha, so Linda, Maxie, Trisha, as a kind of urban guerrilla, still free, but only in the most furtive way. Let's let the last sentences of chapters 8, 9, 10, and 11 stand as a kind of plot summary, okay? Chapter 8, and soon there were more explosions. Chapter 9, here come the fucking helicopters, hide well if you're alive. Chapter 10, in the next box, McDermott survived a few minutes longer. Okay, chapter 11, okay, let's go then, I said. That's it. So, none of this plot synopsis can really give you the feel of the novel. Its remarkable sense of voice, or should I say voices. The first-person voice of Linda / Maxie / Trisha grips us right away with its proletarian immediacy. Didn't you start going on about my da, him slaving away all his life to bring us up respectable in the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and he a real credit, having risen to assistant sales manager in the bottle factory. Okay, but even in that little snippet, we can hear a kind of layering or overlapping effect. Nested inside the voice of the rebellious 15-year-old girl, in mocking paraphrase, is the moralizing voice of her mother, which is perhaps also imitating another class-laden discourse, the discourse of respectability and upward mobility. In fact, with her split name, Linda, Maxie, Trisha, herself is a composite of many heterogeneous voices, what the great Russian literary theorist Mikhail Bakhtin might have called a polyphony. Indeed, in some respects, The Free itself is a polyphonic novel, presenting a plurality of consciousnesses with equal rights and each with its own world, which combine but are not merged in the unity of the event. David Bruce identifies something similar in the post-Paris Commune novels of Jules Verne, a phenomenon that he calls interdiscursive mixing. One more voice that makes an appearance very briefly in chapter 2. We see Barney the play worker sitting up at night, writing furiously, quote unquote, doing this paper on the potentialities of words, fuck knows why, claiming that our very words, our ordinary phrases, hold us fixed in a society where we are functions, objects, and subordinate clauses. And here's an echo of a young Mike Gilliland, actually, studying literature at university, where Dale Spender's Man-Made Language, 1980, made a very similar argument. Well, okay, fast forward to 2007. The Free has gone out of print. The publisher, PM Press, contacts Gilliland to ask permission for a reprint. I said yes, of course, Gilliland recalls, but I would have to type it up in digital form and wanted to change a few things. Once I started to copy it, I decided to update it more and more, and, well, before long, the manuscript had been roughly doubled in length. New chapters and characters had been added. The style had undergone some significant changes, and most notably, the ending has completely changed. It is, in fact, no longer such a tragic ending. The new ending of the new version of the Free, I should say versions, for it's undergone several rounds of revisions since then, is, well, here's Gilliland's own synopsis. He says, "The state is going bottoms up, the climate is going crazy, we're living the collapse of capitalism blow by blow with a rainbow. Maxie and her new friends get free of their traumas and get into dealing subversive death blows to a skinhead gang, a bankrupt school, and the testerical special police." I love the word testerical here. Next thing, they flee to Ragwort Co-op pool in a big safe occupied working class area. We play the adventure live through their eyes, laughing and lamenting, inventing social revolution. The PIF, Pacification Intervention Force soldiers, eventually arrive to restore capitalist chaos. Macra and Maxie are missing, the hunt begins, while the spaced-out invaders get subverted, corrupted, swallowed, and digested. Our odd family puzzles with the pieces, finding a fun lifestyle, a coppice farm, and bright ideas for saving the planet, but keep your hankies ready, folks. Click on your giant wings for the fantastic flying finale. Okay, so while we are warned to keep our hankies handy, perhaps for some lamenting of our own, the emphasis on laughter, play, and adventure are a pretty radical departure from the mood of the original novel. We have in our hands not so much a revision of an old book as a new book with some of the old words embedded in it. So what happened between 1986 and 2007, you might ask? Okay, Gilliland moved to Barcelona, which might be bound to cheer up any resident of the islands north of the English Channel. More fundamentally, though, the weather of the world was changing, both physically and politically, in ways that get reflected pretty directly in the narrative. If we read the Free against the realities of early 80s Ireland and England, we can see all kinds of echoes and resemblances. As a member of the Dublin Anarchist group circa 1980, Gilliland collaborated on a short-lived newspaper, Resistance, which some brilliant people have just scanned in and archived online. Just 2 issues, but you can start, if you leaf through them, you start seeing things that look very much like what you see in the novel. Okay, there are all these facts documented there that would later appear as fiction in the Free. So a story about the defense of a community-run adventure playground, very much like the one Barney the Playworker ran. School resistance campaign, the creation of police-free no-go areas, feminist critiques of neo-anarchist attitudes, and so on. But also, quite centrally, stories about state repression, H-blocks, Mountjoy Jail, the Curragh military prison, Noel and Marie Murray, torture of criminal suspects, and so on. And that is rather precisely the atmosphere of the 1986 novel. By 2007, not only had the weather in Ireland changed quite a bit, a couple of times, but the global climate for radicalism had improved considerably by some measures. What used to be called the new social movements had undergone some important developments, for instance, in the emergence of third-wave feminist and queer contestations of gender and sexuality. At the same time, notwithstanding the tremendous challenges posed by ascendant neoliberalism and neoconservatism, anarchism itself had emerged from its period of deepest historical eclipse, becoming a critical factor in what Richard Day has called the newest social movements. These currents converge in the development of what gets called tactical frivolity, as described by Amory Starr. I'll quote her here. Pink blocks, carnivalesque reclaim the streets tactics, creative blockading methods such as fake car wrecks, tripods, puppets, music and dance and festive celebration, which asserts confidence in happy and creative alternatives to the oppressive structures being confronted, and the joy in struggling for liberation, even in the face of frightening oppression. So it is that we find anarchists in the streets circa 2002 chanting things like, "Fat is sexy, bears are hot, saddle up and ride my cock, I'll strap it on, you wanna watch?" Okay, so the next year sees the publication of We Are Everywhere, The Irresistible Rise of Global Anti-Capitalism, and 10 years later, Why It's Kicking Off Everywhere, The New Global Revolutions. I think those titles say a lot. So, is it any surprise that this carnivalesque atmosphere and the confidence that rides with it fairly permeates Gilliland's revised future scenario? Here, Bakhtin once again makes a good guide. It is Bakhtin, after all, who most thoroughly explored the carnival, once embodied in the medieval festival day, the Carnival, when the entire world of social and religious rules and hierarchies was turned upside down. For Bakhtin, novels were little sanctuaries for that festive spirit, preserving a carnival sense of the world, as he says, mixing together the serious and the comic, prosaic and poetic speech. Interdiscursive mixing, you might call it. Gilliland calls it taking the mickey. Taking the mickey, or taking the piss, is an Irish expression of apocryphal origin, possibly from Cockney rhyming slang, possibly playing off the slang term mickey in the sense of penis, meaning to make fun of someone, to pull someone's leg, to jeer at, to deride, or more generally, hoaxing, mocking, or other insincere behavior or speech. All those senses are in evidence in Chapter 11 of The Free, Cuddly Toys, wherein we meet Macker and his friends in the midst of a police raid on the aftermath of an especially wild shindig. Okay, I'm quoting here from the 2011 Anarchist Library edition, which is my favorite edition. And what a crazy party, starring Macker the magician, leaping up on the table, holding a mock auction among the clothes and toys, inventing outrageous but fitting characters and jobs, insisting they bid for goods and speak on stage. It was so mad it was cool, and Macker had triumphed. The street gang had all dressed up, swapping dares for promises and rolling in helpless laughter, teasing and throwing poses, bidding for each other's erotic treasures. Macker had been a panic, doubling as a bumpkin, arguing with himself, switching character, and taking off snatches of pop songs. We laughed so hard you wouldn't have noticed us choking. Now, our enemies in blue rudely appear at the door, like the proverbial man from Porlock, to disrupt this little carnival. How to resist? How to escape? Macker rises to the occasion, assuring his mates that instead of fighting, in which event they'll be creamed, he'll buy them time by winding them up. Donning a wig and a high-enraged housewife voice, he blasts them with a farrago of stolen discourses. I picture something like a Monty Python Pepperpot character here. Stop that right now! Stop now! Get away from that door, you fat fella! I know you! That's private property you're destroying! For God's sake, officers, there's children sleeping here! Get out! Get away from that! Have you no shame, sir? I'll have the law on you! You with the tattoo! Officers, arrest that man! My husband's in the pool! I'll have your guts for garters, you there! You'll pay for this! There's decent people here! Get back in your van right now! You're a total disgrace to the force! Simultaneously invoking and mocking all the gods of the police, private property, husbands, decency, for the sake of the children, etc., etc., well, this tactic doesn't work half bad. It sows confusion. While the police hesitate, they are pelted with toys and clothing until a sudden gust of wind blew my black wig right off, just like that. I snatched but lost it, and it fell down among the officers. A riot cop lifted his visor and pointed up at me in the window. "That's Macker Madonna, sir," he shouted. "That's a wanted man. He's only taking the mickey, sir." "Almighty shit," I remarked. A kid had caught the wig and run off with it, dodging through the jam. Then I shouted in my little boy voice, "You listen to my mama! Get out of here this minute!" A minute is all that is needed for a getaway. So something similar is deployed as a strategy of resistance much later in the novel, after the successful revolution has been met with an invasion. The primary response to this counter-revolutionary incursion is nonviolent resistance, subverting, infiltrating, converting, and corrupting the occupation forces while presenting them with an ultimatum: back off or face a program of violent reprisals, starting with their officers. The expiration of the ultimatum deadline is preceded by a program of entertainment featuring a comic impersonator. "Laddies and ladies, goodies and baddies, I give you exclusively here today the right, horrible General Tootsie Coopers." Stupid, complacent, cheerfully insisting on his good intentions, General Tootsie is a perfect straw man target for Mickey-taking, mockery, and he is, of course, himself a Mickey-take, a hoax, a fake, albeit one that reveals the truth. Claiming to be the saviors of law and order, promoters of prosperity, they are really here to demonstrate that nobody can escape. The invader's phallic power, his Mickey, if you will, is well and truly taken. But does taking the Mickey really disarm dictators in the real world? How effective is this kind of carnivalesque protest against 21st century surveillance and military might? Isn't something like the ending of the original novel still quite a bit more likely, unfortunately? Well, some commentators have commended The Free in both its incarnations for its realism in presenting the possibilities for an anarchist revolution in the contemporary world, as well as the challenges presenting such a revolution. It is realist in the sense that Dickens' novels and Ibsen's plays were. Namely, it's populated by human beings of fairly ordinary limited power, rather than allegorical Prometheuses, like Percy Bysshe Shelley, say, or V for Vendetta type superheroes, a la Alan Moore. Realism, however, means one thing to political scientists and quite another to literary scholars. In political science, realism in all its varieties is synonymous with the assumption that human beings are innately selfish and warlike, and that the future promises only the same depressingly familiar things happening again and again. In literary studies, realism is just another word for verisimilitude, which is a set of conventions for representing what a particular readership will take to be like life, as artificial, as arbitrary, as made up as any other conventions. It's all a Mickey take, you might say. Political transformation from our perspective is likely to happen precisely when our expectations shift, when what we take life to be like changes. So from that perspective, the carnivalesque aspects of the Free post-2007 are not a failure or even a refusal to accurately represent an objective reality. They're an attempt to get readers to loosen their anxious grip on reality, quote-unquote, or rather, to move away from an overly rigid and narrow sense of what is real, which obscures our view of what is possible. It is we, the readers, who have invaded the pages of the Free, after all, who are temporarily occupying its imaginary territory. It is we who are in need of being subverted, infiltrated, converted, and corrupted, or seduced, by its vision of joyous potentiality. We need to explore its plausible scenarios and strategies for revolution, to be sure. We profit from its realism, but we also badly need to take the Mickey out of the military and monetary realism in which we are trapped. Material forces, certainly, but also so many words and phrases that hold us fixed in a society where we are functions, objects, and subordinate clauses. We need uses of language that invite us to play, to adventure. It is we who need to revise our visions of the future. Thank you.